Welcome to Milan Recording Studios. My name is James Pavel Shakras, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking an approach on something that I've never quite done before. It's going to be kind of a two-in-one video. I'm going to be reviewing the Roland FP-30X for the first time, but I'm also going to be comparing it against its older brother, the original Roland FP-30, in the same video. Normally, I'd split these up into two videos. I'd have one video dedicated to only the FP-30X, and then I'd also have a video about the comparison. But today, I thought I'd try something a little different. You guys will have to let me know if you like this concept or not, of combining those two videos into one. So yes, that is correct. Today we'll be reviewing the Roland FP-30X. I decided to get it in white because to separate it from the FP-30, they otherwise look exactly the same and the video might be confusing. But just to make things clear, the old FP-30 is the one on top in black, and the white one is the Roland FP-30 down here on the bottom. So, what is the Roland FP-30X and where did it come from? Well, clearly, as you can tell by the name, it comes from the Roland FP-30, which was Roland's entry into the $600 to $700 price bracket about a year ago. And I think it came out a bit longer ago than that, but about a year ago is when I first reviewed the original Roland FP-30. I had a few complaints and quibbles with the FP-30's design, and some of those have actually been fixed in the FP-30X, and some of them have not. Now, the FP-30X came out about 2 or 3 months ago, technically, but you weren't able to buy it then. However, Roland was actually sending specific versions of the FP-30X to special reviewers, mostly dealers. And so, of course, these dealers would only say nice and wonderful things about the FP-30X, and the FP-30X didn't actually hit the market and was able for the public to buy until 2 or 3 months after that. So my video is going up against videos from dealerships who only say positive, wonderful things about every keyboard they review, and as such, the algorithm won't really favor mine and probably won't push mine to the top as well. So if you guys enjoy this video and you want to see this video do well, give this video a like and go down in the comments and just say something nice, even if it's just a smiley face emoji. That will definitely help me out. You can also join my Patreon page as well if you're so inclined, which will help me have the funds to purchase keyboards like this. Companies like Roland and others, Roland's not the only one, to do these kind of things, but they'll typically send out versions of the product early to people who they know will only say favorable things about the product. But because I don't only say favorable things about the product, and I'm more than willing to, I guess the technical term you could say is bash, but that's not really the way I think of it. I give the honest truth about a product. If something's bad about it, I'm going to say it. But if something's good about it, I'm also definitely going to say that too. So with the original FP-30, the one major issue I found with it was that it didn't have a direct line output. The only option you had, the only way to send the sound of the FP-30 to external speakers or to a recording device was through the headphone jack. And there's a few reasons that's not good. First of all, it doesn't sound as good. And second of all, it kills the internal speakers, and there's no way of keeping them on, as far as I know. And also, you don't have as much freedom with the direct line output. There's only one version of it, so you can't have the right signal go to one speaker and have the left signal go to the left speaker specifically. It's not quite as free, and you don't have as much freedom with that, and it simply doesn't sound as good. So that's the number one thing they added in the FP-30X. But interestingly, when I made my video about the FP-30 about a year ago, and I mentioned that, and I really hammered in the fact that it wasn't ideal because the other two competitors in the same price bracket, the Kawai ES-110 and the Yamaha P-125, both had proper direct line outputs, whereas this one didn't. I got a lot of flack in the comments for that, just an insane amount. And in fact, it was an amount that was so insane, it was almost a little suspicious, and I have no proof of this, but it was almost a little like Roland was sending out bot accounts. Again, I have no proof of that. I'm not actually saying that that's what happened, because they did end up fixing the problem, so that kind of makes that likelihood a little bit less possible. But there were so many, hundreds of comments saying that, oh, using the headphone jack as direct line output isn't a bad idea at all, and it's totally acceptable, and it's totally perfect, and why are you being so harsh for the Roland FP-30? Well, Roland fixed it in the FP-30X, so clearly it was a big enough deal that Roland would redesign the instrument and add it to them, to the new lineup. And it was also a big enough deal that now in every video of any digital piano that doesn't have proper direct line outputs, other reviewers typically will say it, whereas before they really didn't and just glossed over it. Now it seems like people are making a big deal about it. For example, the new Casio tone, CTS-1. Again, another product that I can't actually buy. I might be able to buy it now, but it was actually sent out to reviewers a bit early before it was actually able to be purchased here in the United States, at least. And that doesn't have direct line outputs, and so people are mentioning, hey, it doesn't have direct line outputs. That's not great. Whereas before, a year ago, before I made my review of the FP-30, they might not have. So that's kind of interesting. So that's the one big fix about the FP-30X, but it's not the only big fix that's new. Another thing that's new is it has a new sound engine, so it's got a few different sounds. It also has additional sounds too, and many of the sounds in the FP-30X are new and improved. I believe the speakers are a little bit bigger on the FP-30X too, which is wonderful. And that's another flaw with the FP-30 and the FP-30X. The speakers face downwards. As you can see, there are no speaker grills. There's no upward-facing speakers with a little vent to allow the sound to directly go from the speaker cone to the performer's ears. It's all underneath and facing downwards towards the floor. And I do have to be honest, these aren't bad-sounding speakers. The speakers themselves actually sound okay, but they'd sound a lot better if they were upwards facing and facing towards the musician. Now, I can kind of see why Roland didn't want to do that. It's because they want to keep this aesthetic of the smooth top that's uninterrupted by ugly speaker grills. But you can make speaker grills look really good. I think part of the reason they also did it is because their entire user interface is off to one side. You can see that better up here in the FP-30. All your buttons are here where a speaker would normally be. A lot of the times with digital pianos, your buttons, your screen, your user interface will be in the middle with the speakers on the side, but because Roland put all their buttons to one side, that left no room for speakers. So that might also be one reason that they have the speakers downward facing, but that definitely does affect the sound, and it doesn't make it sound as good as it would if the speakers were directly upward facing. And as a result, the FP-30X and the FP-30 both don't sound as bright and full and lively as the competition, the ES-110 and the Yamaha P-125. And I'll be doing a comparison between those two and the new FP-30X to see if it's any more competitive than the previous FP-30 was. But let's take a listen here to the FP-30X. Like I said, we'll be using those direct line outputs, which are located right here, to record the sound. So when you hear the FP-30X, you'll be hearing the sound of the direct line outputs. And when you hear the Roland FP-30, you'll be hearing it out of the headphone jack, because that's the only possible option. So let's give a quick little listen here to some Scarlatti on the FP-30X, and then once that's done, I'll talk a bit more about the line outputs, as well as the action and the build quality of the FP-30X. And we'll see if I could remember to do all that. I might forget a couple of things. This is a little sample of the default piano sound. I think I want to talk about the action first, because that's one of the big things that's affecting my performance with that piece. If you're familiar with that piece, Scarlatti's Keyboard Sonata K1 in D minor, you know that there's supposed to be a bunch of trills in there, and I wasn't really doing those trills super well. Let me try that again real quick. The action of the FP-30X as well as the FP-30 is something that from the very beginning was something that I wasn't completely sold on. A lot of people adore this action. They say nothing but wonderful things, and I can kind of see why, because there are elements about it that I do like. A lot of people like to make a big deal about the textured key tops. I don't really notice much of a big difference there between non-textured and textured. It's all about the same to me. But what I do notice is that the downwards attack, when you push the key down, it's actually pretty nice. It has a nice feel, it has a substantial kind of a heavy feel. But the key to a good action, in my personal opinion, and opinions may differ, but for me, a good action, be it in a digital or an acoustic piano, My favorite types of actions are those that are substantial, which in my terms is kind of a little bit heavy, not super heavy, but also not feather light, somewhere in between where it has this substantial feel. I like that feel, but the key to a good action is one that's both substantial and responsive, when the keys snap right back up to the top of the key and allow you to play quick, fast passages and feel like you're a sports car going around the corners real fast and not slipping at all. And this is more like driving a top-heavy truck around those corners. It feels like a good action feels like you're barefoot on the beach, running down the beach with the wind in your hair, and you feel light and free and amazing. Whereas the action on the FP-30X feels more like you're trying to run not on the beach, but in knee-deep water, and you're struggling to run through it, and it's just not working. It's very fun if you ever tried to do that, but it's not fun to do it on the FP-30X. And the reason for that, I think, is because if I had to guess, it's because the keys take a little bit too long to come up to the top. As a whole, the action has kind of a muddy feeling, which makes playing quick passages sometimes rather difficult, and especially trills and things that require repeated notes is much more difficult on the FP-30X than it would be on other digital pianos, and certainly an acoustic piano. So what I think people like when they sit down to play this action is the way that the initial touch, when you put your hands in the keys and you play a note, the way that responds with the internal sounds is actually quite nice. But it's when you go to play faster passages, repeated notes, trills, it just doesn't feel stable, it doesn't feel solid. I was able to do it that time because I was focusing a lot more on just the trill rather than everything else leading up to it. So it is possible to do these trills, but it's just a lot more difficult on the FP-30X to me than it would be on other digital pianos, and certainly an acoustic piano. And that's just one of the things that a lot of people will like to say is, oh, a digital piano's action is just the same as an acoustic piano, and they're not. There's very, very, very few digital pianos that have an action that's competition to a acoustic piano, and although certain elements of this are somewhat pianistic, it's also got that let-off, the escapement feature, which is a little bump you feel towards the bottom of the key. That also might be part of the reason why the keys feel kind of heavy, because that's adding resistance to the key as it's going down. That's another thing, kind of like the ivory feel key tops. I feel like escapement is kind of a gimmick in the digital piano world because it's not really doing anything. It's just a little nub of rubber that's simulating that feel of escapement. And when you actually play the notes on a real acoustic piano, you're not going to feel that bump when you're playing because the escapement is getting out of the way and allowing the hammer to fall back down away from the string, so it's not pinning the hammer against the string. That's what the escapement does. It allows the hammer to escape away from the string. And so when you play the note silently, that bump you're feeling is the escapement mechanism kind of slipping past and letting the hammer fall down. But when you play the note quicker on a real piano, that escapement bump is not really present. But on these digital pianos, because it's working differently and it's just a nub of rubber that an action mechanism is kind of moving past, it's always going to be there and it's always going to be adding resistance. And for example, if you take a look at Kawai's action, the RH3, that also has a simulated let-off, and recently, maybe about a year ago or a few months ago, Nord used that same action with one modification in their flagship piano, the Nord Grand. What was that one modification? The only thing they did that anyone can tell on the internet is that they removed the fake let-off. So if Nord doesn't like it, big company, they seem to know what they're doing, they're pretty successful, maybe there is some merit to my suggestion as well. The let-off maybe is a little bit of a gimmick. So that may also be why this action feels a little bit more substantial, kind of gummy, gummier than it should, but it does make playing certain passages like trills and fast repeated notes a little bit difficult. Let's play a little bit more of Scarlatti. We'll play his keyboard sonata K380, and then we'll explore some of the other tones that this keyboard can produce. For me, the Roland FP-30 and the PHA4 Action just isn't really a fun action to play. The FP-30 has been, the FP-30X has been improved over the FP-30. The tones in here, I think, are as a whole better, and in that regard, the playing experience is better. But when I sit down to play the FP-30, it's not an experience I look forward to. I don't go, yes, I get to play the FP-30. With a lot of other digital pianos I have here at the studio, even those that I don't play often, like the Yamaha P515, every time I pull that out of the box and I go to play it, I'm like, yes, I get to play it. It's fun. But performing on the FP-30 here for this video just isn't fun. I can't relax because I'm constantly worried about, oh, is this trill gonna mess me up? Am I not gonna play this thing right? Because the action just doesn't feel responsive enough. As far as the touch control and the dynamic response, that's all there, which is why people, again, like this action, because everything on the way down is fine. But then everything on the way up is, in my opinion, not ideal, and I think could use some improvement. Now, the tricky thing is you don't want it to be too springy. You don't want the action to feel like it's resisting you on the way down so that it can snap back up and be responsive in that manner. That's why digital piano actions are tricky. The reason the acoustic piano action is as good as it is because it's been evolved. It was invented in 1720, right? You know, and it's been evolved progressively over the centuries until it is where it is today. Digital piano actions have only been around for a few decades. In 300 years, they'll probably be phenomenal. But they're still kind of experimental, and people are still trying to figure out how do we replicate the feel of a real piano in a compact, tight spot with digital sensors and all this stuff. And it's just, it's to be fair, I imagine it's very difficult to do right. But unfortunately, I just don't think it's quite done right here in the Roland FP-30X. So now that I've talked at great length about the action, it's now time to move on to the build quality and the other things I said I'd mention, which would be the other tones. So what is the build quality like of the FP-30X? Well, I don't really have any problems with it. For the price class, it's pretty run-of-the-mill, and that sounds kind of bad, that expression, saying run-of-the-mill or not subpar, but just, you know, par for the course, average. But it is. The build quality of the FP-30X is nothing to write home about. Neither was the build quality of the FP-30. It's just standard, right? You've got all this plastic top, plastic front, plastic underside with that. Actually, that's nice and solid. Is it same as solid on here? Yeah, it is. So you've got, you know, just plastic all around, but it doesn't really have a cheap feel to me. I think it looks a lot nicer in white. The black tends to kind of gather dust, which you probably can't see, but it's got some weird dusty smudges that don't really want to come off, whereas the white, it is newer, but it doesn't have that yet, which is pretty nice. So the build quality of the FP-30X is just fine. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing incredible. It just is. One thing that I both like and dislike is a damper pedal situation. So what I like about it is how long this pedal cable is. I'm going to keep pulling on it and keep pulling on it, and there's still more room. So it's very, very long. And I've said before in the past that I really liked this damper pedal for what it was, the little square Roland's DP10. And that was because I was using it on the floor in the main studio. Here in the ICER room, we are using Oriental carpet, which is, you know, your standard Oriental rug that a lot of people would have in their homes. And these damper pedals don't really get along with it. I think they're a little bit too light, and when you push your foot down on them, they kind of tilt back. It's tilting back right now mostly because of my hand, but the idea is the same. So when you put your foot on it, it kind of tilts back and slowly just kind of inches its way across the floor when you're on carpet. Other surfaces seem to work better for these, which is why I initially said they were pretty decent for what they were, but I think maybe if they were made of metal, they would actually work pretty dang well. Or if Roland just included the higher-end actual sustain pedal like Kawai does with the ES-110. That would also be really cool, too. Something else I wanted to talk about with the FP-30X that isn't fun is the owner's manual. Although this is a simple instrument to use, Roland has somehow managed to make the owner's manual, and again, this is also true for the FP-30, they've managed to make the owner's manual just really convoluted. Now, this text is way too small, which also is the reason it's difficult to read, but you don't need to really see the text to be able to see that this is really complicated. Look at how, like, messy this is. And again, designing an owner's manual and making it look good, I'm sure there's a whole science for that. But it's just something about the way Roland explains everything just seems overly complex to me, and this is all simple stuff, you know, like selecting the tones and using the metronome. They've got these complicated blow-up diagrams of the buttons and the keys and zoomed in at different scales, and it's just like, whoa, a little visual overload here. And then on the second page here, there's more stuff, you know, more big old diagrams and things, and this is really elementary stuff on this page. Setting the FP-30X on a stand. You set it on the stand. Done. You know, why does that need to be in here? You know, connecting equipment with headphones. Plug your headphones in. Done. You know, I mean, attaching the music rest. It sits in the slot. Done. Does that need to be in an owner's manual? I mean, and the funny thing is that a bit about the music rest wasn't in the FP-30's manual. It's only in the FP-30X. Like, did they decide between making the FP-30 and making the FP-30? Did Roland get calls from customers saying, hey, I can't figure out how to put the music desk in? And they decided to put that in. Like, why does that need to be here? I don't know. It's just things like that I feel like can totally be eliminated that make it more, you know, kind of convoluted. And if we go later on in here, look at all this walls of tiny text for troubleshooting. It's probably out of focus, but look how small that is. Look how tiny, right? Like, I just feel like the user manual of these instruments could really use an overhaul. And part of the reason the user manual in this instrument is so convoluted is because of the user interface, which is something that has not been improved since the FP-30. And I feel like maybe should be included. Now, there is an app that you can use with the Roland, and if there's enough interest in the comments, maybe I'll do a whole video diving into the app and talking about it. Because I've heard some people saying that with some of these apps that come with the digital pianos, they're buggy and crash all the time. I don't know if that's true with Roland's, but I've heard people saying that about apps in the past that I can't remember what they are. So if there's enough information or enough interest, maybe I'll do a review on the app that goes with this. But in that app, and there's actually two of them, but in one of the apps, you're able to go in here and customize the way it sounds, so you can change just things with the sound. You can change the brightness, you can change, you know, the ambience, all that stuff. And the other one is one that allows you, it might be the same one, I'm not exactly sure, but one of them allows you to go in there and simply see all the sounds on a big long list and pick and choose them by name, rather than the convoluted system that Roland has chosen to use here. I guess apparently it's cheaper to build an entire app, get it hosted on the App Store, than it is to just add buttons and circuitry to a digital piano. I find that interesting because, for example, to change sounds, instead of hitting a button or scrolling through a menu on a screen, on the FP-30X, what we have here is a row of buttons for categories. So you've got the acoustic piano category, the electric piano category, and the others category. Those are your only three categories, and in these categories you have a whole plethora of different sounds. And to access these sounds, you push and hold that category, and then you push any of these unlabeled, unnamed keys here in the bass. I know that the electric piano category goes up to this E, starting down here and ending at this E. It's been increased since the FP-30. The electric piano category goes up to this E, and I think the others is pretty large and might go even higher. But they're unlabeled, you don't know what they are. There's not even numbers at the back of the keys so that you know, oh yeah, that particular sound is number 6, so let's go to number 6. You have to remember. And again, there's an app for that, but should there be an app for that? Don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. But the electric piano section is another section where the FP-30X has been improved. Take a listen here to the Rhodes sound very quickly, and then later in the video I'll be doing like a true comparison between the FP-30 and the FP-30X, where I show you back-to-back samples of the sound. But for this section, it's mostly about the FP-30X. So it's by no means the best Rhodes sounds I've ever heard, but it's also by no means the worst Rhodes sounds I've ever heard. I think it definitely has some nice elements. You've got some bark to it when you dig in hard. You've got that auto pan that's going on. You've got the growly bass. You've got the bright treble. It has all of the right elements of a Rhodes type of sound. You got that jingly mid-range. And as a whole, like I said, definitely not the worst Rhodes sounds I've ever heard. And as we'll see later on in the video, a big improvement over what used to be in the FP-30. If we go through the electric piano sound, we'll see that there's a few different versions of the Rhodes and of whirlies and stuff. I think this next one's a whirly. And I'm not gonna go through every single sound, or maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what I feel like doing. We'll go through a few of these here. Electric piano sound. This low B here is whatever this is. I don't even know what it is. Let's find out together. Again, not quite as effortless and easy to play that piece, which is one of Schubert's impromptus on this as it is on other digital pianos, but it did work, and I did pull that off, and I think that sounded pretty cool with that particular Rhodes type of sound. Let's move on to low C key here, and we will see what this one is. Yeah, see what I did there? Pretty cool. I've got two pedals, one for the FP-30 and one for the FP-30X, in case you're wondering. Here's C sharp. Clavinet, pretty cool. Here's D. A vibraphone sound without tremolo. Ah, what a wonderful world we live in, Roland. All right, so that was a vibraphone sound, and as we can see here, the electric piano sound doesn't just encompass electric pianos. In fact, I think there's actually very few. We've had two Rhodes sounds, one whirly, one Yamaha DX, and then the clavinet sound, which isn't really a electric piano, but I'll let it slide. We'll keep going here, but I'm pretty sure those are the only electric piano sounds we might have in here. But that one was a vibraphone sound with no tremolo, like I said. I think we were on D sharp. Let's hit D sharp again and see what that was. So D sharp is a celesta. Let's keep moving on here to E. Now, something neat Roland did, first of all, I'm not sure why that super gritty organ is the first organ we run across here, but what I think is kind of neat that Roland's done here with these organs is that if you tap the electric piano button, it actually turns on and off the Leslie effect, which, again, isn't the best Leslie effect ever, but it's better than nothing, and it does bring some life to these organs. Let's check out the next organ sound here. Now, to my ears coming through the speakers, that sounded extremely, extremely loud compared to what we've already been listening to, which is the nature of these digital pianos. Oftentimes, the organ sounds are way louder than everything else, so if that clipped, I apologize. If it didn't, Wonderful. But you could hear, though, even if it was clipping, which I do apologize for, what you could hear was that the electric piano button was toggling on and off the Leslie simulation, and I do like that. The only issue is that the electric piano button is pretty close to the other buttons, and as a result, you can actually accidentally hit the piano category or the other category, which I'm pretty sure shuts off all Leslie effects whatsoever. It doesn't shut them off, I'm wrong, but it does change the tone, so there's that. Let's go on to F sharp here and see what organ this is. Here's G. Here is G sharp. Here's A. Here's A sharp, or B flat, whatever you prefer to call it. Here's B. And here is C. There's a few assorted pipe organ tones in here. I believe C sharp is one. And perhaps my favorite sound, and the final one in the electric piano category, is this one. Which is an accordion. It sounds a little thinner through the direct signal than it does through the speakers. They're adding a bit of bass and fullness to it. So through the speakers, it sounds really nice and full. Through the direct signal, I think it's a little more raspy, but still, it's very nice. And I like the slow attack that it has, which gives it kind of this authentic kind of... kind of slow to respond feel that accordions typically have. So if we hold the electric piano button down and press F, we should still be on the accordion sound, because I believe that's the last one. And indeed we are, so now let's move on to the others category, which has quite a few different sounds in there. Now, if you're wondering why I've bypassed the piano category, it's because to me they all sound basically the same. I'll run through it just for you all, just play a couple chords on each one, but to me they're all the same, and the default one's the best one, which is the one I'd use. So here's the default one for reminders. Here is B flat, yep. Now that's actually pretty nice. I like that. I forget what note that was. See, that's why I dislike this note system. I don't remember what note that was on. I don't remember what the next tone is. Let's try G sharp. Scarlatti wrote for the harpsichord, and he was one of Italy's greatest harpsichordists at the time, so it's only fitting to return to that and give it another shot. Let's go to A here and see what we've got on A. That may have been the last tone in the instrument. Let's try B flat here. Yes, that harpsichord tone is the last one in the electric piano category, and as you can hear, most of the acoustic pianos sound roughly the same. And you've got some outliers like the harpsichord and that really cool dreamy one. But most of them sound about the same. I think it's time here we move on to the others category, which has some interesting tones in it, so let's check that out. As the name might describe, the others category features other types of sound. You've got some string sounds, you've got some synth sounds, and then other things. So we'll take a quick look through here. It's not really the main focal point of the Roland FP-30X, but some of these sounds in here are kind of fun, so we'll just take a quick, brief look in here. First up is the strings pad sound. And you can play that really, really quietly. B flat gives us something. Sounds almost like the exact same string sample, or patch, or whatever you want to call it. Up next is B. Again, sounds like the same thing, maybe with the mids boost a little bit to give it some more detail in there, but same basic idea. Here's C. Am I doing this right? Are these changing? Here's C sharp. Okay, that's definitely different. Here's D. That's like a bass cello type of sound. It's actually pretty nice. Maybe could use a little more vibrato, but the tone is pretty cool. I think that was D. Was that D? Let's try D. That was D. Let's try D sharp or E flat. So E flat is a harp sound, E natural is a... It's like a strings and horns kind of sound. It's not the best though. I think we need to go to F natural now. See, that's why I dislike that method so much. It's just, why? All right, let's do F. It's like a synth strings pad. Here's F sharp. I think I hit it right. Here's G. Here's G sharp. That's an old sound Roland's been recycling for years, and honestly, I can't really say I mind. What is this? I think it's rattling. Is it distorting? It's rattling the speakers. It almost sounds like a really distorted, gritty bass guitar. Might just be rattling the speakers, though, I'm not sure. Not too many of the sounds of this instrument actually distort the speakers, which is good. This one does, and I think a couple of the other bass sounds might do it, but none of the acoustic pianos, electric pianos, none of the other ones actually will rattle or make the frame of the instrument vibrate or make the speakers freak out, which is a good thing. You got a couple that do it, but not too many. What key were we on? Gee, I have no clue. I gotta go through here and find now. So I'm pretty sure that bass with the ride cymbal sound is the last tone in the others category. If I hit up here, I'm not actually on the bass cymbal with the ride, but there it is. If we go beyond that, there's no other sounds. So I'm pretty sure that's the last sound that's built into the instrument. My understanding is that the app also allows you to access other sounds that you can't get to through this annoying menu here. But personally, I would much rather have the sounds laid out in some kind of a menu, be it via a screen or even a color-changing button. And you just toggle through might even be better than this, which I find to be rather annoying. I mean, that wouldn't be the perfect setup either. It would have its own annoyances. If you go past the sound you'd want, you'd have to cycle all the way back around or something, but not really the best. One thing I can say that is nice is, for the most part, except for the organ sounds, I believe if you're holding down tone and you change tones, the sound remains the same. So there I changed from the acoustic piano to just a random key, which turned out to be the honky-tonk sound, and you could hear that the first piano note I played didn't change at all, even after I started playing notes with the honky-tonk sound. So that's good. You've got seamless sound switching. But I really can't imagine, unless you memorized and knew the pattern, or even put labels on them, I don't know, memorize the pattern of what keys give you what sounds. Unless you knew that like the back of your hand, I really couldn't imagine someone making changes like that in a live situation. But someone could use this perhaps as a MIDI controller on live, and that would be fine. But again, the action isn't really the greatest in this, in my personal opinion. So even if you wanted something like that and you were going to trigger acoustic piano samples, you might want a better action. But again, if you're doing MIDI, you're probably using other sounds besides piano, like synth stuff and sound effects, so who knows? That decision is up to you. There's other features the Roland FP-30X has, and there's a few other features that are hidden away in the keys. For example, you can change the ambience of the instrument by holding the function button down, which also duals as your Bluetooth button. And that Bluetooth functionality is the way that your app connects to the keyboard, as well as being able to use the FP-30X as a Bluetooth speaker, which I have done, and I just clicked a random YouTube video and started watching it, and it was actually really enjoyable. Not only was the video good, but also it sounded good through the speakers, and I actually kind of forgot I was using the keyboard as a Bluetooth speaker. It actually worked pretty good. I've had other digital pianos that sounded kind of funky as Bluetooth speakers, and this one obviously isn't the highest fidelity Bluetooth speaker you could get. I'm sure some things wouldn't sound amazing. With those speakers facing downwards towards the ground, music might not sound ideal. But the video I was listening to was basically a guy speaking, and it had some background music, which sounded really nice. It had Rhodes in it, and I was like, wow, that Rhodes sounds really good coming out of the FP-30X. So it works pretty well. But the ambience feature, for example, is accessed by holding down the function button and pushing this key, which increases it, so now we have some kind of a reverb sort of effect. And I believe you can go up to 10 and then down again. If you push the middle button, so this button goes up, this key goes down, and then this one in the middle will reset you to the default value, which is cool. I like that functionality of it. So we can crank up the ambience a little bit more here and play something that's a little bit more ambient and enjoy the ambience. Definitely not the best reverb sound. I just had to drop that piece there because I've heard enough of that reverb. It's definitely not the best reverb, but it does kind of add some life to it. I think something else the acoustic piano tone in this instrument is lacking is kind of like sympathetic sounds. In a real acoustic piano, if you were to play that exact same piece or anything that has the pedal down throughout most of it, you'll hear the strings, even the ones that you aren't striking with the hammers and playing with the keys, the other strings with the dampers up will be resonating in sympathy with the notes you are playing, and that gives a acoustic piano almost like a built-in reverb. It sounds really, really nice, and that's a effect that a lot of digital piano companies strive to have in their samples. When you hold the pedal down, sometimes you'll hear the sounds even of the pedals lifting up. We don't have that here with the FP-30X. And you'll also hear the sympathetic resonance of the strings in the higher treble, and on really good samples, you'll even hear it lower down in the keys as well. I hear very little of that. I think there is some in the high treble. Actually not hearing a lot of it there. Starts to come in up here. As you can hear, though, when you first hit the key, you kind of have this swell of sound that happens. I guess that's kind of emulating the hammer strike noise, emanating throughout the rest of the piano. But it sounds exactly the same for each key strike, even down here. In a real acoustic piano, it'll start to sound kind of the same in the last few notes, that hammer key strike noise, but it usually will sound different for every note down here, and it sounds the same for every note on the FP-30X. And you'll also notice you don't hear the sounds of each pitch I'm playing resonating throughout the rest of the instrument. You just hear that key noise, and you hear the notes that I've played. And this is using Roland's like supernatural sound engine or something. I don't know if it's using all capabilities of the supernatural sound engine. A lot of people praise that very highly and say it sounds amazing, but what I'm hearing in the FP-30X definitely isn't terrible. It actually sounds okay. If you put it in a mix, played it in a live scenario, it would sound just fine and nobody'd notice, but by itself, as a solo instrument, not the best sound, acoustic piano sound I have heard, but it is a $700 to $800 acoustic piano. It's not a Kawai MP11 SE, so there is that as well. You can also change the brilliance in the keys as well, so we can make it brighter, make it darker. You can change the key touch, which I'm imagining is going to be the sensitivity of the keys. You can change the master tuning up here again with holding the function button and hitting keys over and over and over again. You can also access some USB song functionalities by playing. So the play pause is going to be this key, and then I guess increase, decrease volume, or maybe next track, previous track would be these two keys. And then you can also have the speaker be off, put it on stand mode, or put it on desk mode, because this instrument has a feature where, because the speakers fire downwards, especially, it's really going to sound funky if you put it on a desk or a table. I actually haven't done that, so I don't know how it would affect the sound, but it certainly would make it more muffled, might amplify the bass, but it's got stand and desk mode, so if you're putting it on a desk, you could put it on desk mode. If you have it on a stand, like I do here, you could put it on stand mode, or you could simply switch the speakers off, and now there is no speaker tone. But that came through the that came through the direct line signal. We can turn the speakers back on. I'll put it on the stand mode. I just want to see. They should sound the same. It should come out of the box on stand mode, right? That sounded like how I remembered it sounding. We can hit the ambience button and turn that off. You can also transpose here as well. You've got a transpose icon labeled here. There's also some numbers here for some MIDI stuff, and then you can also change the input volume over here. And I believe there may be other functionality hidden in the app too, but those are all the things available on the keyboard itself. You also have a metronome right here. Cool. For some reason it's on waltz time, 3/4 time. You can also make your own recordings and play back a demo track too. I believe making a recording overrides the demo track, so if you really love that demo track, you're just going to have to overwrite it, which is a little unfortunate, I guess, but not the end of the world. What else here? You can also split sounds too. So you can have like bass, I'm assuming by default down here. And probably in the app, you can customize and change what sound is in the bass and what sound is in the treble. You can also layer sounds together too by pushing 2 buttons down, and now we've got whatever I had in the electric piano sound layered with the acoustic piano. And I don't remember what sound I had on the electric piano last, so this may be a nightmare or it may be beautiful. An interesting combination, accordion and acoustic piano. So those are all of the features, and those are all of my opinions of the FP-30X. While throughout this video I've been making little comparisons between the FP-30X and the FP-30 because I really can't help it, up until this point this video has really been a review of the FP-30X by itself. You'll notice I haven't been playing the FP-30 or even touching it very much up until this point, but now that's where everything changes. So this is technically now the true comparison section of the video where I compare the sounds of the FP-30X. The FP-30X, gesture to the wrong keyboard, we're going to be comparing this one to this one, right? There we go. So a few things I wanted to talk about. One of them is that I'm not going to be going through every single sound and comparing every single sound. There's really only 2 that I want to talk about, which is the default acoustic piano sound and the default electric piano sound. I might take a quick look at a couple of the other sounds, but does it really matter if I compare all the strings pads? First of all, there's more of them on the FP-30X, and second of all, I don't think most people are buying this because it has a specific string patch they want. So we're really going to be talking about the 2 main things that I think people might be using an FP-30X for, at least with the built-in sounds. Acoustic piano, electric piano. But first of all, I wanted to talk about a fun little discrepancy that I thought was funny in the owner's manual. Does it matter? No, not really, but I just thought it was funny. So I was looking through the owner's manual of the FP-30, and something I noticed is that it specifically says to long press the button for power to turn it on. And that is true. To turn on the FP-30, which is something that mildly annoyed me, you can't just push the button and have it turn on. The light will light up like it's going to turn on, and it teases you that it's going to turn on, but it actually won't. You actually have to push and hold the button for a couple of seconds, and then it will power on. In the owner's manual for the FP-30X, it also says to long press the power to turn it on, but you don't have to long press the power anymore. Watch this. Voila. It's now coming on, which is wonderful. So thank you, Roland, for fixing that tiny little thing that no one would ever really notice, but I noticed it, so that's wonderful. And now that both instruments are back on and powered up again, it is now time to check out the acoustic piano tone. Now keep in mind that the FP-30 will be being recorded and you'll be hearing it through the headphone jack, which is right up here, and the FP-30X will be being recorded and you'll be hearing it through the stereo line outputs here in the back. And something about those, I don't remember if I said this already in the video, it's kind of funny because it's almost like Roland just tacked them on to the back. Typically with digital pianos, you'll have your whole row of I/O on the back, your inputs and outputs, and usually they'll all be together. You'll have your power, your damper pedal input, maybe a second damper pedal input, sometimes an expression pedal input, you'll have your stereo line outs, sometimes you'll have a headphone jack in the back, you'll have your line inputs, you'll have your USB, you'll have your MIDI, it'll all be on one line, and sometimes there's extra stuff too. With the FP-30, some of that is true. You've got your USB and your power that's all up along the top here, and then normally I expected that the line outputs would be right there too, but they're not. They're down here a ways. And when you look at the back of the keyboard, you can really see the line outputs are pretty far separated from the rest of the instrument. So although one could look at this as saying that Roland just literally just drilled a couple of holes into the FP-30X, stuck the line inputs, and called it a day, or line outputs really, there's actually maybe a really good reason they did that. And that's because if you have all of your I/O all in a row, it can be, especially if you've got your sustain pedal inputs, your direct line outputs, your direct line inputs, all next to each other, they're all 1/4-inch jack holes. So you can't just feel around behind the keyboard and be, that's the one I need, and put your jack in the right input or output. But with the line outputs being so far away from your pedal input and from your MIDI inputs, not that you'd confuse those two, but with the line output jack, being so far away from everything else, there's no confusion, which is actually kind of cool. I like that. So with all that out of the way, let's hear the acoustic piano sound. I think what I'm going to do is play Scarlatti's Keyboard Sonic K380 again, and play little bits and pieces of it here and bounce back and forth between the two pianos. And we'll see how that goes. It'll be a fun challenge. It may not be a perfect performance, but you'll still get the point across of the different tonal differences between the FP-30 and the quality differences in sound between the FP-30 and its headphone jack and the FP-30X and its stereo line outputs. Set it right that time. Let me just set up my pedals there. I've got two of them side by side, so I've got to get that all set up. Here we go. So you can definitely hear the difference there, I think, between the FP-30X and the Roland FP-30. The FP-30 has kind of a thinner sort of sound, and I'm not entirely sure how much different the actual piano tone itself is. How different it is between the FP-30 and the FP-30X. But I do think that the tone of the piano in the FP-30 is less warm. It sounds like the FP-30X is a little bit more warm, a little bit more full, a little bit more detailed, and although it lacks a lot of those really realistic details of realism that I've mentioned earlier, it still sounds a lot better and a lot more enjoyable to listen to on the FP-30X than the FP-30, so there's definitely some improvement there. But where we hear a massive difference is with the electric piano tones in the FP-30X versus the FP-30. So, one of my other massive complaints with the FP-30 originally was the default Rhodes sound. I genuinely thought it was terrible, and I genuinely still do. There's a few issues with it. One of them is that when you play the note harder, you don't get that bark sound. And that bark sound, if you don't remember, and if you're not familiar with the real Rhodes, is this type of sound. So when you play the note gently, as I will here in the beginning, it'll be gentle and bell-like. Then if you hit the note harder, it'll be kind of loud and punchy and stabby. So that's the bark. That's what the Fender Rhodes is so well known for, is being able to do that and have those loud, punchy, dynamic bits. If we play that same type of a thing up here on the FP-30, there's nothing. But not only that is there no bark, but there's also these really super weird tonal shifts across the entire register of the old FP-30. As you go up the scale, you'll hear the Rhodes change in timbre for like this set of notes, and then this set of notes, and this set of notes, and then the rest of the keyboard will all have a slightly different attack, a slightly different sustain, a slightly different tone. And although, yes, on the real Fender Rhodes, the tone changed across the instrument, it did so gradually, and you didn't have, at least not on a well-refined Rhodes, you wouldn't have little patches here and there that would sound different. Maybe one note, but not an entire section. So on the original, the old FP-30, if we go through here, I'll like point at the camera, oh so rudely like so, and every time I do that, there's a tonal shift. So let's start here. So hopefully you could understand that, and hopefully you could hear that as well. Every time I was pointing in your general direction, that was when there was a tonal shift, and which isn't really good. And the whole Rhodes sound on the FP-30 didn't sound good. The FP-30X is a different story. You've already heard it in the video, but I'll play it again and do some side-by-side comparisons. Now, while I said it's not the best Rhodes sample I've ever had, it is leagues better than the FP-30. Opposite, just leagues better. So much better. You have that bark, you have that grit. There is a slight timbral shift somewhere in the middle of the keyboard here. Again, I'll point to you when I think I hear it. It's right in there somewhere. I think it's right above like C or C sharp in the center of the keyboard here. Maybe E. But it's incredibly subtle, and no one really noticed it ever. So as a whole, the tone of the electric piano here, the Rhodes, is so much better. It's also got that auto pan, which is kind of cool. So we'll do some back-to-back comparisons between these two, just to really give you some ideas of how much better the Rhodes sound is now on the FP-30X. And when I first saw those early released videos of people who were, music dealers and stuff before the FP-30X actually launched, I was watching them carefully to hear that Fender Rhodes sound, and as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness they improved it. I was so happy to see that. So that, I think, is a stark difference, huge difference, and big improvement on the FP-30X in that regard over on the FP-30. One more small thing I wanted to add before I wrap up the video is another little improvement they've made to the FP-30X, and that is the music stand. So this was the old music stand for the FP-30. First of all, it has this strange curve in it. Not sure why. Roland thought that would be a cool idea, but they did. But more importantly is that the little shelf here is very flat, and music can easily slide off of it, and it's, as a whole, just kind of has a cheap, bendy, chintzy feel. They have decided to upgrade that, which is something I didn't really expect. This is the music desk for the FP-30X. First of all, it's white, obviously, to match the keyboard. But more importantly, the build quality is still a little bendy, but it feels a lot more durable. You have texture here now, these little ridges, which I haven't really tested it out, but I'm imagining it will definitely catch your music much better and keep it from sliding off with those textures. Also, there's this weird little line here that I guess they've added for aesthetic. Hopefully you can see that, but it really just is a ridge on the back of the thing. It's almost like they went out of their way to use extra plastic, just a tiny little bit, to make it, instead of just cutting out a little line. They've actually molded it in and they've done this kind of a thing to create that line rather than just making it thick and cutting out a bit. So that's kind of an interesting aesthetic, but hey, it looks nice. And the music desk is a lot more solid and also looks quite nice. Strangely enough, it doesn't actually fit into the old FP-30 slot. It does. Yesterday I was doing it and it didn't fit. Now it does. How interesting. So I take that back. But there you have it. That's the music desk for the FP-30, and now I think it's about time to wrap up the video with kind of a conclusion. So hopefully you all have enjoyed this video between the FP-30X and the Roland FP-30. I've been looking forward to the FP-30X for quite some time. When I first heard it being launched and being announced, I was excited for it. Then I was bummed that people were getting it 3-4 months early before it even launched, and now I have it, which is good. So I'm glad that I have it. Definitely, like I've said earlier in the video, if you want to help me out, definitely give this video a like and leave a comment down below. Even just something as simple as a smiley emoji will help me out. But the actual differences between the FP-30X and the FP-30 are definitely heading in the right direction. I was unhappy with the FP-30, and although the FP-30X isn't perfect, there is some improvement. The direct line outputs, the Fender Rhodes sound, the added music desk. But the things that I still think could use some improvement, most importantly now, would be the action. Like I've said at length earlier in the video, it needs to be more responsive. With that, making it more responsive and more snappy and more crisp and more piano-like will make it feel really wonderful. Maybe Roland could experiment with removing the let-off and just seeing what that feels like, doing some tests in-house and seeing if that detracts too much from the experience. I think it might add to the experience not having let-off, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Roland put it in there for a reason. I'm under the impression currently that having escapement or let-off, it goes by both terms, in the digital piano isn't really all that useful. And Nord believes that same way too. So FP-30X is definitely on the right track, but like I said, the things I think should be improved would be the user interface, the speaker setup, and the action. So we've kind of narrowed it down. We've got less major flaws in the FP-30X. And so if you're one of those type of people who really loves the PHA-4 action and you sit down on it and you go, oh, this is lovely, this is my baby, then go ahead and get the FP-30X. But for myself personally, and I think for many others, if you sit down and you try to play something fast, if you try to play some trills, you try to just do repeated notes, you'll notice that the action of the FP-30X doesn't repeat as well as it could. And I think if it repeated better, we'd have a much better digital piano on our hands. And with the speakers, again, they're not bad speakers. It sounded really great when I was listening to that YouTube video via the Bluetooth speakers, and the FP-30X doesn't sound horrible. And there's also no distortion either. I believe the speakers have been upgraded. They're bigger than on the old FP-30. So there's no distortion with almost any of the sounds except for those low, loud bass tones on a few of the sounds. So if we had a different design here where the speakers were upward facing and directed sound directly at the performer, if Roland insisted on having this user interface be the way it is, maybe just take it and just shift it to the middle and then have speaker grills on either side, that would be fantastic. I think that would probably really help improve the tone. What a lot of makers do is they do have downward facing speakers, but they also have upward facing speakers, so you kind of get this like a surround sound kind of experience, and I've noticed that works well on some digital pianos. Others just have upward-facing speakers, which also can work very well. I think Roland is using nice speakers here. I think they just might need to optimize them to really direct the sound right at the performer, and having them upward-facing, I think, would create a better sound. And again, the user interface, not my personal favorite thing. If there's enough interest, I'll do a review of that app, but I just personally would much rather have a user interface where you can directly interface with the instrument and have all the sounds on tap without having to do button presses and key presses and combination things like that. That just drives me insane. You can probably see that it was frustrating me in this video, as well as if you go back and watch the old FP-30 video that I did a couple of them, you'll also see that that frustrated me then too. So hopefully you enjoyed this video of the FP-30X. It probably wasn't everything Roland wanted to hear. It wasn't all glowing and all positive, but that is why I do my channel, is to create honest and reviews of instruments. Not always positive, not always negative, always a blend of both, and that is what the goal of my channel is. But that's also why companies like Roland and others are afraid to send me products, or even, I guess, let me get my hands on them at the same time other people do. So with that all out of the way, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you might want to go check out my channel. I've done lots of cool videos of digital pianos, acoustic pianos, Roland pianos, Yamaha, Kawai, Casio, Korg, all kinds of other stuff. So if any of those brands interest you, if any of those things interest you, you might want to go check out my channel. Like I said, leave a like, leave a comment down below if you enjoyed this video. And also, if you want to, you can join my Patreon page. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Keep in mind that the FP... Dingus.